Good morning. We're using tennis as one of our exercises so we can see the larger picture. And in the 1970s, there was Billie Jean King, who was an icon not just of women's tennis, professional tennis, but of the women's liberation movement in general and of the larger picture which caused such a profound change in our society. From our playlist, we realized that Billie Jean King playing the men in tennis wasn't quite all it seemed. It turned out to be what used to be called a Barnum and Bailey-ish show, although it was quite successful. And the idea that the Virginia Slims tennis store turned out to be Virginia Slims cigarettes. There was a battle at the time, quite a battle, between a huge tobacco lobby and the doctors who realized how bad cigarettes were. And Billie Jean King and them were simply part of the tobacco lobby. They literally made money by making other people worse off. The fact that other people were hurt by that didn't faze them a bit. And then there was the idea of the open era of tennis, which wasn't true at all. It simply favored gals who practiced vice and threw out gals who practiced virtue. If you were around then and you were a gal and you were kind and courageous, you were the one that went back and asked the 10-year-old what he wanted for his birthday, and you were plunged into the world of the welfare mother. You did all the work or producing, and they did all the consuming. If you have time, go on the computer and type in images of the Virginia Slims tennis tour. You've come a long way, baby, and there you'll see posters of that era. And among those posters will be gals who were young and at the tennis court, and they're very classy and very endearing. And stop for a moment. Push aside the cigarettes and have a second look at it. Those were amateur tennis players having fun at the tennis court. That's what we want. That was the middle class America. We were heading for it and doing darn good. Daydream a bit. At the time, somebody such as a housewife was considered a profession. Being a housewife was a profession. And just daydream, and you can see the gal dropping junior off at the elementary school, and her working life is different from the guys, and now she has time for the first time in several years. And it's for her to you can just see her changing the dial on the radio and playing that very classy country club instrumental music and heading for the tennis courts and playing tennis all morning and having a drink with one of those umbrellas in it and a massage by somebody named Bjorg. That's what we want. That's what we hoped for. And we were there. We were getting there. We had a huge middle class. Our middle class was unique to every other country in the world at the time, and that includes the communist countries, the prima donna intellectual government. Let's change the they threw that out. Billie Jean King and them threw that out. Let's change now and talk about today. Those tennis players today don't seem to have any sense of joy or any sense of kindness in them. They seem mean. They're a breed now, aren't they? They're as big, as tall as the basketball players, including the gals. They have to start playing tennis when they're about 5 years old. They say of the millions of tennis players, only a fraction of a fraction actually make money at it. And those gals, they do exceptionally well. They make millions. And that's Darwin. Let's keep this up in contemporary times. Last year there was a commercial for tennis rackets, and that commercial showed a pretty girl playing tennis, and then they showed the factory, and they showed gals in the factory making the tennis rackets. And there you go. There's the that gal has to spend her entire life putting her child into a daycare center so she can work all day making tennis rackets so that somebody else can consume. She produces and others consume. That's a nightmare. That's not what we do here. It's for that gal who makes those tennis rackets to get to the tennis court, and with the other gals and they get to play tennis and they get to go to the shopping mall. It's their time to experience that sort of thing. That's called part of being a Yank in this world. That's part of the middle class. Let's go back to the 70s, and there was the phrase, the open era of tennis, and change the scale. And there was, at the time, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and it was then that they came out and decided that homosexuality was no longer a mental illness. Before it was, and now it wasn't. Then there's that kind of bum's rush, isn't there? What they threw out was being the identity of a Yank. The idea that it's not a natural thing at all to straighten out your emotions and to place the priority of one decent thing over another, to make money by making people better off, and then holding Christ, that computer cloud of emotion that makes up God and country. That identity of being normal and well-adjusted, that identity of a Yank, they threw out. The same is true with courts. Look at things today. Well, the same is true with courts. About a decade before it started, and they came out and said that there would be no religion in government. Can't have any religion in government, and so you have to stop and ask, they have something, and it's just not religion, and what is it? And then again they said you could not discriminate against race, creed, color, or national origin, but that is a creed, and they do discriminate. In fact, they discriminate against reasoning itself. They discriminated against the identity of a Yank. Look at things today. Everybody's incredibly racist. People get jobs such as investing in businesses that follow their political identity. They threw out the idea that people who hustle, con, manipulate, and intimidate people were the bad guys, and the priest was the good guy, people who were normal and well-adjusted. They threw out a judicial court, a court that will establish facts that are true as true. Excuse me. As this week goes by, you walk around, you'll notice some things. Here in Tucson, since we're by the university, you'll notice a group of gals, and they'll be driving BMWs and Mercedes, and they're heading off to the university. And they do that because their parents and grandparents years ago got into gold and real estate. You'll see a huge army of gals who work 40 hours a week, who have to put their child in a daycare center, who have to ask for help from the government in order to pay for that daycare center and get on food stamps, just so they could pay rent, and just so they could pay rent to somebody who, well, got into gold and real estate years ago. And they're the ones that are the university professors that insist on government subsidies so they can help that gal pay rent to them. It just goes on that way, and it's just not going to stop. And from the point of view of the guy, you're going to walk out, and as this week goes by, you're going to see a whole army of guys who just can't afford to support a wife and 2.2 children. There are names for that sort of character. None of them are nice. A peon is one of them. I was going to end this anecdote by pointing out that Billie Jean King, in a very real and honest way, was an icon of the contemporary male. But that's negative, so let's end on a positive note. If you're listening to this and you're a gal, go back to those posters and put yourself in the character of an American Yank, of that gal from the 1970s. How much money, how much of a budget do you need to run a household and get the kids off to school so you can go play on the tennis court? As best you can, try and figure it out and let us know. And from the point of view of the guy, you don't ask how much money you can make. You can make $20 an hour and you don't even come close to making enough money to support a wife and 2.2 children. They only made a quarter of that in the 1970s. I believe 1973 was the highest standard of living for the average Joe. And they could support a wife and children, and So the point is, it doesn't make any difference how much money you make. Don't look at how much money you make. Rather, look at how many hours you have to work in order to come up with a budget. And speak up. Somebody better start speaking up around here. Once you do that, then we know where we are and we know where we need to go, and we can get started. As for me, I shall be an American Yank. I'll see you on the next anecdotes.